because when I came home after 8 years, I paroled out to my brother's walk-in closet.
I still got 3 years of parole left.
Hi, I'm Kevin Harrington. I'm an original shark from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and I'm here with Brendan. We've got a big event happening this fall in Kansas City, and I'm going to be there. And I know you're going to be there, Brendan. Let's tell the folks all about it so we can get them there too.
Are you letting fear, doubt, insecurities, what other people think stop you? Are you ready to get to the next level of your life? That's what we do. Go on over to comechangeyourlife.com, see what's going on. We have events all over, but we have a powerful event coming up this fall where Kevin is going to be speaking. So if you want to come meet him, you want to come meet me and my team, come on, comechangeyourlife.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to From Felon to Fabulous. We have a fantastic guest tonight. And yes, he did 16 years, but he wasn't guilty. And now he's speaking about it. He's helping others. And I can't wait for you to hear his story because he got to experience what our judicial system is like, both on the inside, now on the outside. And he has something to share. So let's welcome Jeff Deskovic.
Hi, Brenda. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, thank you very much for coming. And you know, you've got quite a little story to tell.
I do, and I do indeed. I was in prison for 16 years wrongfully from age 17 to 32 for murder and rape, which I did not commit. The case happened in Westchester County, a suburb in New York. I was wrongfully convicted despite the DNA not matching me. That was caused by a coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, terrible public defender. I lost 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole. Ultimately, I was exonerated through further DNA testing, which not only established my innocence, but identified the actual perpetrator. I've been home for 18 years now. I have a nonprofit, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. We have as our mission freeing wrongfully convicted people. We've gotten 14 people home. We have helped pass 3 laws and another 6 aimed at preventing what happened to me from happening to others. So I became an attorney as well.
That's a lot. So when did you get out?
In September 2006. So 18 years ago.
Yes, and you've been busy since then. But before we get to that, let's talk about what it felt like to be indicted and arrested and convicted knowing that you were an innocent man.
Wow, well, I mean, I up until it happened to me, look, the idea that somebody innocent would be arrested never dawned on me. I mean, I held the common misconception, obviously, if you didn't do it, they wouldn't have arrested you for it. And I certainly never dreamed that innocent people would be convicted.
Man, that's the way it's supposed to be work.
So it felt like really surreal. Right? It felt out of control, and like I didn't really understand what was happening because I mean those things occurring, was against how I conceptualized the world.
You think that the judicial system is going to be fair and honest, and that's not always the case. And in your case, you got put away as an innocent man for a rape and murder charge. And you did 16 years as an innocent man. What was that mindset like? I mean, did you finally just succumb to, I'm going to be here forever for the rest of my life? Nothing's ever going to come of this. What went through and how did you get out of it?
Sure. So when I was originally convicted, I mean, I couldn't believe what I heard. I mean, the first 2 charges, I was found not guilty of, and then finally, I heard guilty, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Did I just hear that right? Did they just say guilty, and then I heard guilty a couple of more times, and I didn't know what was going to happen after that. Frankly. My mindset, though, in general, from when throughout prison was, well, let me say this: that half the time I couldn't really believe what my senses were telling me. Right? I mean, there was so many things that went wrong, from coerced false confession to a prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, my lawyer essentially not defending me. The odds of any one of those things happening, as I thought about it, seemed to be astronomically large. I mean, much less than all of them would occur and that it would culminate into a wrongful conviction. So I really couldn't believe half the time when I first got to prison that I had been found guilty. But aside from that, my overall mentality was that, I felt like I just had to hold on for like 1 or 2 years, at which point the next appeal was going to be decided, at which I was sure that I was going to win because I was innocent. And I believed in the system, so I kind of lived from appeal to appeal. But I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up,
right,
suicidal ideation. But I knew that nobody was coming to my rescue, so I was going to have to hold it together in order to be able to make outreach to somebody that could help build the bridge between me and the legal help that I needed. So to do that, I knew I had to hold my mind together. So I didn't have the luxury of losing my mind. I didn't have the luxury of just giving in to depression. Though the thought of just laying down in my bed, don't talk, don't go through the whole prison experience of going to your programs and through the different daily life in prison. I thought about not doing that, but then that really led to nowhere. That would really lead to just remaining in prison. So I couldn't.
Yeah. So what actually happened that you got out?
So I wrote a letter to a book author in care of the publishing company But someone at the publishing company sent the letter to an investigator, and when I sent her the paperwork showing that the DNA didn't match me, she believed in me at that point, because she had never before saw a case where DNA excluded somebody and yet they were convicted. So her believing in me was definitely a big key. And she gave me what proved to be the winning idea. She said, look, you should write the Innocence Project again, a nonprofit organization in Manhattan that works to free prisoners across the country in cases where DNA testing can demonstrate innocence. So I wrote them previously, but they were taking DNA and testing it and then introducing that evidence to the court as newly discovered evidence. That wasn't an option for me because the DNA was already known by the jury, which had convicted me anyway. So I would not have thought to write them again had the investigator not suggested it. So she said, look, the DNA database has been created, so the prior denial is irrelevant. So I wrote them, filled out the questionnaire, and I forgot about it. And then at that point, she lobbied them to take my case, got other respected legal professionals to lobby them. And then I got lucky that one of the intake workers, who was not a lawyer, presented my case an additional 2 times, making it 3 times in the aggregate, in order to get the Innocence Project to take my case. So that was the first of 3 keys. Second key was that the former district attorney of Westchester, Janine Pirro, who had fought all of my appeals and blocked me from getting further testing, she left office, and her successor was willing to let me get the DNA testing. And the third key is that when they put the DNA into the DNA data bank, it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was only there because, left free while I was doing time for his crime, he killed a second victim 3.5 years later after killing the victim in my case.
Wow. If that wouldn't have happened, do you think you would still be in there?
Yeah, definitely, because that was the something new, is when the DNA matching the actual perpetrator, that was the new evidence. Without that, if it would have just simply excluded me again, they would have said, well, this information is not new. It was already evaluated by the jury, which found you guilty.
So this is state, right? Not federal.
Correct. Yeah, this is New York State.
So state, is there any ramifications for that when you're wrongfully convicted? Is there anything you can do?
Sure, you can seek compensation. So New York State has a statute that you can seek compensation for. It's kind of like no fault insurance. So I don't have to prove misconduct. I just have to prove I was wrongfully imprisoned. So I hired a civil rights law firm, and I filed a civil suit under the Court of Claims. They settled with me after 5 years. We also filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. And the difference between that and seeking compensation under state law is that you have to show that there was a malicious violation of a constitutional right that led to the wrongful imprisonment. So there were 4 defendants there. I sued the city of Peekskill because it was their officers who had coerced a false confession out of me and fabricated other evidence, and they didn't document 17 witness interviews that they conducted. The prosecutor's answer to the DNA not matching me is he got the medical examiner to commit fraud, to commit perjury. So after the DNA didn't match me, this medical examiner suddenly claimed that he remembered that he forgot to document medical evidence that he claimed showed the victim had been promiscuous, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue that was how the DNA didn't match me, that she was sleeping around, that she slept with someone before I murdered and raped her. And then he took it to another level and mentioned another youth by name. But he never tried to set the proper foundation for that. So he never asked for a DNA sample to have a test done. He never called him as a witness. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. So that was the basis. So that fraud by the medical examiner, that was the basis of my claim against Westchester County, because he was the county medical examiner. So he settled with me. Westchester County Legal Aid was another defendant. That claim was based on legal malpractice. So in a nutshell, I told my public defender who I was with, my alibi, and he never interviewed the alibi witness, never called the alibi witness at the trial. So they settled with me. And the last one was Putnam County. So the Peekskill police drove me 40 minutes away by car across county lines from Westchester to Putnam County to deliver me into the hands of this Putnam County Sheriff's investigator to do the polygraph test. And so I had a trial against him that for his role in helping to coerce the false confession against me. And he fabricated a statement and attributed it to me also. So I went to trial against him, and I was able to win a jury verdict.
Well, that part's good news. But was it worth 16 years of your life?
No, absolutely not. No amount of money is worth it. I want to try to concretize for the audience. Let's think about what I lost, right? Because I was arrested when I was 16, lost a trial at 17, was in prison from 17 to 32. Formative years.
Your best years.
Best years, yeah. I did not graduate high school. I didn't go to a high school prom. I missed births, deaths, weddings, rites of passage. So when I was released eventually at 32, I had to do things that at a much later age than what people did. I had to finish my education at a non-traditional age. I was not already in a career. I certainly wasn't married or having a family. But also, I got a driver's license for the first time. I wrote a check for the first time. I went shopping for the first time. I had to balance a budget. I had to get I lived on my own for the first time. So all those things made it very difficult. So short answer is no. It was not. No amount of money was worth it. I'd be willing to give it all back and go
Take
in
that
debt.
time back. Yes.
Just to have that right. But being as though I couldn't do that, certainly getting compensation was an important tool in terms of rebuilding my life. I mean, it was a very difficult 5 years. So in brief, I want to share, and I mean my first 5 years of freedom. So I was always passed from a financial point of view. I was always passed over for gainful employment. So consequently, I lacked stability of housing. I bounced around from place to place. At one point, coming within a couple of weeks of living in a homeless shelter. The world was much different. Technology, cell phone, GPS, internet was all different. Technology was different. That added to why it was I was not able to secure gainful employment because because I wasn't familiar with the technology, but also because the business owners, the managers, they wanted somebody that had job experience, which I didn't have. They wanted somebody that could hit the ground running rather than some patience with on-the-job training. Then culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. So those three elements, the culture, technology, and just the way that things physically looked, made it feel like I was in a parallel world, a world that I didn't belong in. It was awkward when I'd meet up with members of my extended family because overwhelming majority of them never came to see me. And the ones that did, often spaced their visits out with maybe 3 years. So it was very sporadic then. So that was awkward. I had to go through that. I had to deal with the mental health. I had to deal with the mental health fallout. So for about 6 years, I saw a mental health professional for 4 times a week. I had to deal with the social part of it, the stigma part, the social stigma. You were in prison for 16 years wrongfully, yes, but you were there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? So lastly, it was just lonely. So it was a very difficult 5 years. And the financial compensation, I didn't have to worry about whether or not I could make my bills. I was able to continue on with doing therapy. And I think that just the sheer passage of time cleared things from my mind also. And as the more I learned technology, the more tied into the world that I felt, the more normal I felt.
Mm-hmm. But you got out that first 5 years. So did they clean your record? I mean,
Yes.
What happened? Okay.
Yeah,
so
it was. Yeah, my record was automatically expunged. You are correct in the premise of your question that in many states that is an issue for people who've been exonerated, yet they still have a record. But that wasn't an issue for me in New York.
So your issue was you had no experience.
My issue was that I had
life experience, work experience, financial experience, all that came with that, because you basically got taken as a teenager, put into prison, and came back out as a man.
Exactly right. Yes. Yes, exactly right. And I want to also share that, beyond the scholarship that I got from Mercy College, now Mercy University, I mean, I used some of the money that I got as compensation. I mean, I paid off my student loan. I got a master's degree from John Jay College, and I was able to use some of the money to start the nonprofit organization, and also I paid for a law school education, graduating from Pace Law School. I mean, wanting to become a lawyer, I'm getting tired of sitting in the front row of the courtroom where I might have worked on the case with the lawyer, might even have been the boss of the lawyer. So, I mean, I can't imagine putting my life back together again without the financial compensation, which is why that's one of the issues that I'm working on, and with my colleagues and the National Coalition Group. It could happen to you, and our Pennsylvania chapter. It could happen to you, Pennsylvania. We are working on passing compensation there. That's one of 12 states that does not compensate people.
Wow, and I don't think the feds compensate at all.
Well, no, the federal government they have a compensation statute. It's $50,000 a year per year of wrongful incarceration. Which is low. That's very, very low.
At all. Right.
Yeah, I mean that would mean, by that math, you're telling people that if they did 20 years, wrongfully, that that's worth $1 million. I mean, it's not. So it's not. They have. My point is that they have something, but it's not as sufficient. It needs really to be upgraded. And some places like Wisconsin, it's $5,000 a year with a cap of 5 years. New Hampshire's like $9,000 a year, and some states like Montana, their version of compensation is university education. So yeah, there's it's definitely, there's issues tied in with compensation. And I want to quickly mention, since we're talking about compensation, one thing New York does not do, and which the overwhelming majority of states don't, is the reentry services piece. So I think that, separate and apart from any financial compensation that it's awarded, I think on the first day that someone is exonerated, there should be housing, cost of living expenses, doctor and mental health, access to public transportation, classes on technology, job training, job placement.
All of that, yes, because you missed it all because of them.
Correct. And for me, as is now, they just release you with nothing. It's almost like reintroducing an animal back out, to a forest or to a jungle.
Mm-hmm.
And
they don't really care.
They don't really care. No. And sometimes, I mean, look, I was very fortunate in the limited sense that, I was given, an acknowledgement of my innocence. I was giving an apology in the courtroom. Most people do not even get that. In fact, they actually get a kick in the pants on the way out the door. Some dramatic statement by a prosecutor in the courtroom or in the press. Well, we don't say that him or her is innocent. We're just saying that if based on the passage of time, based on witness memories fading, based on this other new evidence, if the trial was held again, we don't think we could prove him or her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But we're not saying that they're innocent, and leaving like a cloud of suspicion over somebody's head.
Yeah, and it ruins people's lives. Once something like that happens, the average person doesn't know how to fight. So even if they get out, luckily, they still don't know how to fight for themselves, for their mindset, for their reputation, for their integrity, and they give up. And they take the low-paying jobs. They take, moving in with somebody that's not a good fit for them or whatever, just to succeed, their level of succeed. Just to be able to survive. And to me, that's so sad. So sad.
I
agree.
Yeah, right. I did do so. I agree with that completely. And I want to also say, there's, people come out in different ways. Thankfully, I mean, some people are just broken psychologically to the point where they have so many debilitating mental health after effects that there's no way possible, even aside from all the other challenges we talked about, there's really no way possible for them to get employment just from a psychological point of view, but thankfully that wasn't my lot. And, I am doing something about it. I mean, look, I make sense of what happened to me in a kaleidoscopic type of way. I think that purpose in the world is to fight wrongful conviction or free people that this has happened to, work on preventing what happened to me from others, hence the organization and becoming a lawyer and the educational steps I've done along the way. I feel very fortunate that, you know, I've had educational opportunities that many other people haven't had, and I came out okay mentally, and so I do feel a self-imposed responsibility, you know, to do what I can in order to help other people. And, you know, with that realization, you know, the advocacy work, which, you know, I find it's healing, it's cathartic, it makes a difference, it makes my suffering count for something. I have my purpose in the world, and that gives me a sense of inner peace.
So tell us about that. You actually work with the Innocence Project, don't you?
I work with the Innocence Project. That's the organization that exonerated me. I do work with them in terms of policy work and public education, not on cases, but so a few measures that we're working on now. So just to hold up some of the bills we're working on, passing the measures in New York. So we are trying to pass a bill that would mandate that the police record custodial interrogations, all of them. Right now, the way that everything is, police have to record custodial interrogation, custodial questioning, but they made exceptions for homicide, sex offenses, and drug cases. So we want to get rid of those exceptions. Just to give some context, coerced false confessions have caused wrongful convictions in 29% of the DNA proven wrongful convictions. And one of the best practices is to record the interrogation from beginning to end with the camera facing. So look, it could be clear, were there threats? Are there false promises? Does a suspect really have guilty knowledge, or is instead information being given to them either on purpose or unintentionally by law enforcement that's then regurgitating? So we want to get rid of those exceptions, and we want all interrogations to be recorded with a custodial not. So that's a policy issue working with the Innocence Project on. And another one is a bill called that in shorthand is referred to as a police deception bill, which is that it would ban law enforcement from lying to suspects in the course of interrogations, you know, which would be a recognition that lying to suspects in an interrogation is inherently coercive. That has led to some false confessions.
Man, so, you know, you went on to become an attorney. You went on to help people. How many people have you gotten released?
All right. So the organization as a whole, we've gotten 14 people out. So as an attorney, I helped to overturn my first case a year ago on December. I served as co-counsel to the lead attorney, Oscar Michelin. We overturned Andre Brown's wrongful conviction. Andre had been in for 23 years on a double attempted murder, which he didn't commit. He was released in the second week of December, so he got to spend Christmas with his wife and his kids. Right now, since then, there are 9 cases that I'm working on, that I'm co-counsel on, and some of them I'm second seating more experienced lawyers, and some of them I'm the lead attorney. I have somebody more experienced that's second seating me, so I get to have the experience on both of them. But you know, being someone's attorney in a co-counsel capacity, whether lead or second seating, I mean, that's certainly not anything that I would have been able to do if I had not become a lawyer. I've gotten many more opportunities to do speaking engagements and to do media and new media interviews. I've even had the honor of there's been quite a few gatherings in front of groups of judges or groups of prosecutors where I've covered various wrongful conviction topics, and a special type of presentation which is called the CLE, continued legal education. So lawyers every couple of years have to complete a certain number of credits in order to keep their license current. So I've been able to teach judges and prosecutors, on different legal topics related to wrongful conviction. So that's certainly not anything that I would have ever been able to do if I was not an attorney. And listen, it has done a lot for me, just internally for me, just knowing I have feeling empowered, having the law license, having the law.
No, absolutely. A feeling of now you're doing something, a feeling of belonging, a feeling of value.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. A feeling of belonging, a feeling of, really doing something. So when it comes to like accomplishments, I have to say that I'm more of glass half empty type person rather than a glass half full. So I always want to accomplish and make as much of a difference as I possibly can, and being a lawyer is an additional way of doing that. And here's the other thing too, and this really kind of speaks to a mindset issue, and I think that it's worth sharing with the audience. I think of myself as an advocate. I think of myself as a lawyer. I'm an exoneree, but that's my backstory. That's what motivates me. I'm an advocate or a lawyer on the same par as somebody who was not wrongfully imprisoned. So I don't give myself that crutch. I compare my body of work.
You did the education, you passed the test, you are just as qualified. That's right.
Right.
So let's go back to your prison days.
Sure.
What was the worst thing you saw?
Wow. All right, so I'm gonna just, obviously I'm not gonna speak as a lawyer right now. Okay, I'm not gonna take it down.
No, this is you as a person, right?
Correct. Just you, me, and whoever else is listening in the audience. So the worst thing that I was aware of, that I didn't physically see, but I became aware of it after the fact. The worst thing was that there was one prisoner who was raped by another. That happened one time in 16 years, but one time was one too many. That's the worst thing that I was ever aware of. But another thing that I was very terrible, also not as bad as that, but not all that far behind either. And this I unfortunately witnessed in person. Is I remember I was playing chess at the table, and so were some other people at a table behind me, and all of a sudden one person came out of nowhere and attacked somebody else physically, and then pulled out a shank and managed to puncture somebody's lungs with the shank. And I want to for all that can correctly, for all the criticism that can correctly be leveled at correction officers, I want to give them credit for this particular day. I mean, they came out and they came so fast, separated the people involved in the incident, and they rushed the stabbing victim to the hospital because his lung had collapsed. And had they not moved really quickly and professionally and brought them the competent services, there's no doubt that the stabbing victim, would have likely died. So I want to give them credit for that. But that's
not always the case with the COs. They're
no,
not
it's not
there to help.
No, it's not. I want to share. No, far from that. I mean, sometimes they would literally look the other way and walk the opposite direction when violence was occurring because they wanted to avoid breaking things up and filing paperwork. Many of them brought their frustrations of their personal life into the prison, displacing their aggression onto the prisoners. There were sometimes guards there that my sole goal when they were working was just to somehow avoid even coming to their attention. You're walking on eggshells. You don't want to wind up on someone's bad side. I mean, they can, they have all the power there. You don't have any, and no, who's going to believe the inmates over a correction officer, right? They'll believe a prisoner who's going to tell on another prisoner. Then there's no credibility issues, right? Because the
absolutely, and that runs rampant.
Double standard. So kind of a double standard. And then there were officers, even their peers hated because the way that they conducted themselves made it likely that prisoner to staff violence could occur that could suck everybody into it. But yet and still, the blue wall is what controlled. I mean, nobody ever bothered to reel them in, not their coworkers nor their supervisors.
In my short 4-year stint, I saw in the women a lot of violence, more so than I would have thought. I expected in the men's, but I saw very vicious attacks. I mean, coming from the other side of the room. For some time, we don't ever know the real reason. We only know what we see. Saw some almost very life-threatening things happen, and even saw some dangers to COs, which is the correctional officers. So, you just never know what you're going to see. And I was in a little bit different situation because I wasn't actually in prison. I was in a federal holding facility, which is high security. So I'm in there with very violent offenders and myself, very low custody offenders. And it just is what it is. And all you do is life continues. You don't You don't get involved. You just don't get
Don't even
involved.
react on your face. Don't even
No,
react
we
on
went
your
on playing cards until they called lockdown. We
right,
just sat there
exactly.
still
Because you
doing
could
your
find
thing
yourself
until they called
because
lockdown. That's right.
you could find yourself attacked by that person or one of their friends, and why do you don't mind your
Yes.
business? And at last, I want to mention, because I was in prison for the rape along with the murder, that made me particularly vulnerable. Like I was always concerned that
Yes.
the other prisoners would discover that could be as a motivation on their part to assault me. Several times in my incarceration, I was assaulted. One time, I nearly lost my life. But I wanted to add is that it wasn't just I had that issue at times with the prisoners, but even some of the correction officers also
Yes.
had. Sometimes there
They
were a
had
couple
access to
of
the
times,
outside world to find out. Yes.
there were a couple of times when some prisoners came over and said, "Yo, Officer so and so is over in the next mess hall. He's telling people over there about your case." Hoping that would put a battery on someone's back to then come and attack me. And I'm totally helpless. What am I going to do? I'm going to confront the correction officer. I mean, that's not. You
You
can't do
can't.
that.
That's just going to make it worse. It can't go snitch. That's going to make it worse because you do a write up about it. They're going to investigate. They know it's going to come from somewhere, and of course they're not going to do anything to that CO, but that CO can do a lot of damage to you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Which is very unfortunate, but it is the truth. I have seen them toss cells for no apparent reason, and I mean, just take their commissary, and they're not supposed to take anything that's unopened, but they do. Anything if they don't like somebody. So I can't even imagine if you were there long term with a CO that didn't like you. At least in a holding facility, people came and went. I was there longer than most, but the average person wasn't there longer than 18 months and even shorter than that. But I will tell you, there was also a lot of very cool COs. I actually got to MC one of my CO's weddings, actually two CO's weddings. They got married. Both of them got married. And I tell people I don't ever want to go back, but I'm really glad I did because it completely, I was the privileged white girl, never saw how the other side lived. I got an education that I normally wouldn't have gotten, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today had that not happened. I'm not bitter. I'm not like you. I was completely guilty of so many things, but you don't seem bitter. You have a
I'm not.
reason to be bitter.
I'm not. So I'll tell you why I'm not. And because look, I want to enjoy my life as much as I can,
Mhm.
and I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter. Another
Right.
thing is that I've lost so much as is. Why would I
Why
want to
lose more?
in effect?
Right.
Right. And then lastly, it's not like I'd be impacting any of the people involved in what happened to me. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And
Mhm.
I take the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take the energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work. But there were, yeah,
Absolutely. Now, are you married now? Do you have children?
no, I'm not. I'm not married now, and I don't have any children. No.
Okay. But what is your relationship now with your family, your,
Sure.
parents,
Yeah.
siblings?
So it's been a long time. I've been home for 18 years now, and I've done a lot of work, and they've done a lot of work. I've rebuilt relations pretty well. With my mother, with my brother. My brother came 3 times in 16 years. Not at all in the last decade, but I would say we've worked through that. And same thing with members of my extended family. I do want to share that a commonality amongst many members of my extended family is they all feel like a type of collective guilt because number
Right.
one, they didn't come see me, they didn't support me, and there were several times where my mother made rounds amongst all the extended family members, requesting that everybody put in a manageable amount of money so that I could hire the necessary legal services. And
Did they believe in your innocence?
they did, with two exceptions. So I had an uncle in law enforcement, and the police managed to convince him that I was guilty, and he
Oh, of
shared that
course.
with his
Mhm.
daughter. But outside of those two, they did believe in my innocence. It's just that their belief in my innocence did not translate into them assisting me either on the morale level or in the other manner which I mentioned.
Mm. Man, I tell you, I've heard a lot, I've seen a lot. things that I would have never believed. I would have argued that didn't happen. I was a firm believer in innocent until proven guilty, where the reality is you are guilty until proven innocent, and then your reputation's in the toilet, no matter what. If you're innocent or guilty, it's a hard fight once charges are brought against you.
Right. And in building, I agree with you. And in building off of that point, look, for the most part, my innocence wasn't questioned for the most part because the DNA matched the actual perpetrator. He confessed. He subsequently was arrested and convicted. The district attorney commissioned 4 experts that studied my case and issued a public report outlining the different ways that the system broke down. So for the most part, people didn't question my innocence, but there were a few, a minority to be sure, but some, that did. Like I had people come to me and say to me, yeah, well, I was talking with this person or that person, and they said, how do you know? How do I know that you're innocent? You weren't there. Listen, don't be someplace alone with them. So I've experienced some of that. But an even bigger issue than that, but in the same spirit, really, is just the stigma. You were in prison wrongfully. Yeah, sure, for 16 years, but it was wrongful. You were innocent, but you were there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? So I've encountered,
because prisoners are so violent. All of them were just all bad people, and that's just not true. I met a lot of really cool people.
Yeah, I met a lot of people there that were really smart. There were people there that they were somebody different. They changed. There's a such thing called aging out of crime, and so I met people there that they were different people than when they committed crimes 10, 15, 20, even 30 years.
Well, yourself included. I'm seriously going in at 17 and coming out in your 30s. You were a different person.
100. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm definitely a different person. But in terms of people that I met there, some of them were very creative. Some of them had artistic skills, and I perceived that, a lot of the people I came across, really were not threats anymore. They could be safely released. It didn't seem to me that anybody, that anything good was going to come out of their serving the additional 5 years left on their sentence minimum, or 10, or however much longer that they had to serve. But yet, distressingly, I would see many people go to the parole board that some of them were literally living in honor blocks. They were serving as a role model for the younger prisoners. Some of them had bachelor's degrees, associate's degrees, completed all types of vocational trades, therapeutic, and not the only thing that seemed to matter to the parole board was whatever the nature of the crime was, which is something that could never change. It was something that the judge already took into account when fashioning a sentence. And so to deny people parole, order them to serve 2 more years, go back to the board, be denied again, and to have that cycle continuing in a seemingly never-ending cycle of perpetuity, to me was almost a complete abandonment of any idea of a rehabilitation, of any belief in a second chance. So that's actually a couple of the non-innocence reforms that the foundation's working on in collaboration with the lead entity, RAP, Release Aging People from Prison, Vocal, New York. So a bill called Fair and Timely Parole in New York, which would require the parole board to cite one additional factor other than nature of the crime in order to justify denying parole, and the companion bill, elder parole, which if passed would mandate that anyone who is 55 and has also served 15 years in prison, that they would be given a parole board appearance in contemplation of release, not a guaranteed release, but just a consideration, a hearing, because, and by the way, 55 and 15, those are not numbers that are just arbitrarily pulled out of the air. Per the Department of Corrections' own standards, if you're 55 and you've been in prison for 15 years, you're elderly, just taking into account the impact of incarceration on health and accelerating age.
I went in 3 years out of cancer, a year and a half out of treatment, and health was not good. Medical was not good.
I want to build on this. Is the very point I wanted to make. I'm glad you shared. So I want to say that I both saw and also experienced firsthand the terrible medical care. It seemed like the Department of Corrections, that the medical staff, their answer to everything was over-the-counter medication. You could go see the nurse, not the doctor. That they would have to. It would take often like 1 or 2 months to see a doctor.
You know, when we did see a doctor in the facility, we called it Doc in the Box. It was a virtual doctor. And now I was very fortunate. I knew enough about my medical. I knew enough about, I was an educated woman going in. So I wasn't having to learn as I went. And my personal doctor was actually the doctor for them many years ago. So he knew how they worked. So he helped my parents and my husband get me the treatment that I needed. And I was able to get in touch with the, I can't think of who it is right now, the Inspector General in DC. And they came and visited me while I was in there, and my medical care improved. And I started seeing the cancer, because I was supposed to be getting scans every 4 months, once every quarter. And they got me into my original cancer doctor. That was unheard of. That was a little bit embarrassing going in with chains to see the doctor that you've known for a couple years, but it took that. But most people don't have the education or the drive, and then they don't have the family that's going to help them on the outside.
That's exactly right. And to build off of this point, continuing on the path of talking about the terrible medical care in prison, and linking that back to elder parole, while the prison medical care in general was terrible, they were particularly inept when it came to dealing with the advanced geriatric needs of elder prisoners. Like I saw people there that were, on dialysis, or were bedridden, or who were walking around hunched over, or who were literally pushed around, in wheelchairs. Department, they have what's called compassionate release. So if you're determined to be terminally ill by the prison medical staff, then you can apply for early release. The theory being that you could die with some dignity in a free environment, surrounded by, friends and family, rather than just in dying alone in prison. But often the system was so bureaucratic that by the time they made a decision, it was too late. Somebody was either dead, or they were released, and they spent they had 1 or 2 more days left, and then they passed away on the outside. So
Yes.
it was just so uncaring, and just not civilized. It's barbaric.
It is barbaric. In 4 years, I saw 2 of that. I saw an elderly woman who was a nurse. She had a bowel blockage, and she ended up dying. She ended up coming back with, the nurses were refusing to send her or take her to sick call. And she ended up coming back with a stoma on the outside, a bag on the outside where they had removed.
The colostomy bag, right?
Yes, colostomy bag. And it wasn't much longer after that she did pass away, because, infections didn't give her what she needed to keep it clean. And they let her out to die, but she was in the hospital. She didn't even know her family. I talked to her sister, and she said she was coherent with her for maybe 5 minutes, and that was it. And she was there for a crime her husband committed. She hadn't even been found guilty yet. She was still waiting her case. So it was crazy. I'm telling you, I've seen some things. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We have a time limit. We're going to have you back, and to be continued, because this has been great. So you guys can go to his site right there, deskovic.org, and find out what you need. Donate. There are some people in prison that didn't commit the crime. And if you really know some of them, just listen to their story. They're not liars. Just like Jeff here. He didn't commit the crime. It cost him 16 years of his life. Jeff, is there anything you would like to say to our folks? Any words of encouragement for folks that are just coming out? Anything like that?
Sure. So in terms of people who are coming out, think about what you want to do with the rest of your life. What career do you want to have? Identify what training or educational steps that you want to do along the way. Be willing to work at basically any kind of job, anything that's legal along the way. Remember the low wages we worked for in prison. So if we have to work at a low paying or minimum wage job, but then do that. It's just going to be temporary until it's easier to go from job to job than no job to job. So I wanted to share that with people. The technology will be different, but try to learn one new piece of technology each day. The more technology I learned, the more tied into the world I felt, the less strange that it was. And to back up to a point that you just made a moment ago, my dream is to have a chapter of the foundation in each state and ultimately in each country. That's going to be when we get the public financial support to do that. What if 25,000 people were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis? That would give us close to $1 million. We could hire other lawyers, investigators, paralegals, other essential personnel. We could work on freeing more people. You go to the website Patreon and the Deskovic Foundation. You can join the fight. You can, it does unfortunately take some money to do this work. And we want to work on freeing more people. We want to work on improving the system. And if we all do a little bit, we can do a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff, for coming. Your story is fantastic. Your attitude is great. I truly wish you success in everything that you're doing. So guys, stay tuned. We have some more great stories coming up. There'll probably be a part 2 to this one. What is he doing now? And we can maybe get into more about the Innocence Project and some of the folks that have come out through your work. Thanks again for coming. Stay tuned for a few commercials. On becoming the best version of yourself? Do you endure strict diets, intense exercise routines, and countless self-help programs that promise to make you the best? Well, my name is Brenda Ringwood. I'm a motivational speaker, but I'm not here to make you the best. We're always pushing to achieve an unattainable standard as quickly as possible. But our lives are a journey, and no diet or program or speaker will get you to the mountaintop anytime soon. I can't promise to make you the best, but I know I can make you better. And that's why I started my company, Becoming the Better You. Because having a better life tomorrow starts by changing your mindset today. It's taking small steps to overcome challenges, set goals, and make improvements that last. Visit my website at comechangeyourlife.com and find out how you can bring my team out to your next event or business retreat. Stop striving to be the best and focus on becoming a better you today.
Or do you want to be the person that's helpful, that soothes, that loves? Because you can still stand tall and be as big as you want to be when you are this person.